Welcome to another Dev Roundtable. We're here for a good time and a long time. Um, we'll edit that out. Uh, how's it going, everybody, on this wonderful Friday?
Snow's melting. It's a good thing.
Yeah. Here we have fake spring, so it's just raining and cold all the time. Good times. Um, well, part of the reason why I wanted to record this is because it's been a while, but also because Casey had a cool topic that I think is going to be interesting and maybe spicy, depending on how we go. So, Casey, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, sure. I think this conversation could go a whole lot of different ways, and I don't really have like a specific direction in mind. So I'm excited to just kind of open the topic up. I've got a couple minutes worth of talking I can do, but really I just want to kind of prime the pump and then see what thoughts people have about it. By way of a little background, I have been a Lisp programming dabbler for basically my whole programming life. Like I was reading stuff about Common Lisp back in the 90s. I am an Emacs user, so I've written a fair bit of Emacs Lisp just to like customize the editor. And I've been a Clojure dabbler for like a decade at this point. But I've never actually done any like really serious Lisp programming. So my personal programming growth goal for myself for 2024 was to finally take Clojure seriously and like get some fluency with the language. As opposed to just like, kind of poking at Lisps like I've done in the past. They've been just sort of a curiosity for me, but not like anything that I felt fluent with. So in the process of learning some more about like how serious Clojure programmers work on like an actual day-to-day basis, I came across an Emacs mode called ParEdit or ParEdit, and the par is parentheses. Um, and it's this mode, and at this point, I believe it started in Emacs for Emacs Lisp specifically, but has been expanded out to other Lisps and then out to other editors and IDEs and everything like this. So it's not a concept unique to Emacs at this point, but it's this notion of structural editing where you're not typing, you're not thinking about your code in terms of text. You're thinking about it in terms of, uh, like the structure of the program itself, more so. And that is to a large extent how Lisp programmers think about Lisp programs also, like the whole, not to get too far into the weeds on that, but like, there's all these parentheses in Lisps. That's the first thing people notice when they see Lisp code. And the whole reason that they are like that is because what you are programming is basically the abstract syntax tree of your program, which is what gets created as an intermediate step by compilers in other languages or interpreters. So you're sort of skipping the first step where you're typing a bunch of code that looks a certain way and going directly to the part where it makes this tree out of the code. And so, um, anyway, I'm getting way into the weeds already. What I wanted to talk about is different like mental models of text editing. So let me just go ahead and start showing some stuff here. Uh, I think this is not like a strict taxonomy. I don't think you can draw like really hard lines between these ways of thinking, and they influence one another, right? Like things bleed across these lines all the time. But the way I see it, there are sort of roughly three categories of like mental models of text editing. There's sort of your typical like character and line based editing, and that's what I think most people are familiar with who don't know anything about like fancy programmer text editors. It's like it's what you're doing when you're typing into Microsoft Word or like a text box on a web app or whatever. And it is, you've got some text, you've got a cursor, you're moving around, you can move up and down, you're going by character here, and when you're editing characters as well. And it's all immediate, right? Like I'm typing and things are getting put into the buffer at the same time. And then, you get other stuff as well, like end of line, beginning of line. Emacs has these controls. I can't see where my cursor is going, but it should be going to the, because Zoom was in the way. Yeah. So like, I'm pressing Control A and it jumps to the beginning of the line. Control E, it goes to the end of the line. And it's all very visual. It's all very immediate. It's about characters and lines and whatnot. And, this has kind of been, as long as we've had interactive editing, this has been kind of the baseline for how that stuff works. And, stuff gets added like word motion. Like I can press meta F, meta B, and it's just jumping to the next space that it sees basically. So like, that's convenient. I can delete backwards one word rather than, just a single character at a time. I can delete a whole line of text rather than one at a time. But by and large, it is a sort of, very immediate, very character-based way of thinking about things. We can contrast this to Vim. Please don't critique this Ruby code. This is just some crap that I crapped out for other reasons. Vim introduces a couple of really interesting ideas that I think amount to a sort of like different mental model for text editing, and those are modal editing and text objects. And modal editing, I think, is the first thing that people encounter when they encounter Vim. It's so weird. Like you open up a text buffer and I'm like, I want to type def. Wait, what? Why aren't letters appearing? I'm typing letters, but they're not showing up.
It's really great if you happen to want to type something that has an I in it. That's when you accidentally learn.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So the modes in Vim are very interesting, but I think what's actually more interesting in terms of like mental model is this whole notion of text objects. So Vim has this whole editing grammar to it, and Vim power users sort of like have internalized this, and they're thinking in terms of like basically like complete sentences about what they want to do to their text. So, you've got verbs like delete or copy or paste or insert. And then you've got nouns, objects of the sentence as well, like paragraph, line, word, within parentheses or within square brackets or whatever. And that sort of thing. And some of this is like through plugins like surround mode and stuff, but like I think it all amounts to this notion of like these objects that are a little bit bigger than just characters or lines. They're like things that are more interesting than that. So like, for example, a paragraph. I want to delete this whole method, and a paragraph can be thought of as like, a thing that's got two blank lines around it. So I can say delete around paragraph. And what I just typed was DAP. D is delete, A is around, and P is paragraph. And so again, you're making these little sentences in Vim about words, paragraphs, whatever. And I have this really clear memory of one of the first times I paired with Jim at Adorable. I was kind of like learning. I was getting familiar with Vim. I had done a little bit of Vim, but I didn't know a whole lot about it. And I did exactly this, delete around paragraph, or like I needed to do that. And what I did was I started like visual line mode, and I was like coming down here and selecting a bunch of text and then pressing D to delete. And Jim just started shouting, DAP, 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 DAP. Because he wanted me to say delete around paragraph instead. So that's Vim. It's this, I'm not trying to establish like a
hierarchy,
or like saying that one of these things is better than another or worse than another. I think the like what editor is good conversation is like, that's not very interesting to me. I think what's more interesting is to say like, how does this thing think about things? How does this thing think about things? How are they different? I'm not really at all interested in saying this is better. Just this is different, and here's what's interesting about why it's different. So yeah, that's what's interesting about Vim to me is the text objects. So we're talking about sentences, we're talking about paragraphs, we're talking about words. And as it turns out, those notions that, come from written language translate reasonably well to source code as well. So, you can think of a paragraph of text and a paragraph as like, a method or whatever. The thing that's new to me this year is this structural editing mode. So here's some Clojure code. Again, don't critique the code. This is just like some scratch. Who cares? But the notion of this structural editing thing is kind of almost like pushing that text objects things notion further, but at the same time, like making it more specific for code. So like we're talking about the trees that we're writing inside this code here. So let me just give you an example. Let's say I've got, some numbers that are just here, and I'm like, oh, I want these all to be inside a list. So I've got a command in this mode that lets me surround the next expression with some delimiters. So my cursor's over this one. The next expression is the one. That one is an expression. And I'm like, oh, let me put that in square brackets. Boop. Uh-oh.
It's undefined, man.
Boop. Yeah, well, if you hold down the wrong key, then it does a different thing.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough. So that was a thing that I just did. I'm holding down meta and I'm pressing square bracket. Boop. Oh well, and again, it does a weird thing.
Is it just the wrongs? Are you doing like right bracket instead of left bracket?
Yes, yeah, that was exactly it. And this is something I'm getting familiar with, so I'll probably do a lot of fat fingering as I demonstrate. But yeah, it was trying to go backwards instead of forwards, which is what I wanted. You've also got, and this is my favorite part of this so far, the notion of slurping and barfing. So you can slurp up additional things within these delimiters. So right now I'm inside this vector. I want to slurp up that too. So boop, I just pressed one key to slurp, slurping. And now I'm like, oh, not everything actually belongs in here. So I can barf. I'm barfing them back out.
Can you, this is like a push pop deal, but is there, well, I'm trying to remember the Ruby things. It's like shift unshift. Can you do it from the left as well as the right, or is it just based on how you have it set up?
Yes, yeah, you can go the other way too. So there, I just barfed front.
Nice.
Front barfing and
front barfing.
I think yeah, barfing and going the other end, we could probably stop that conversation really quick.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, you can do other things like drag things around. So like my cursor is over this 3. I'm going to drag it forward. So I'm just pressing keys to drag the 3 around, drag the 3 around, drag the 3 around.
Cool.
But it knows about these forms. So now I'm at let me actually come to the back of this form. So I'm at the back of this vector, and I'm now pulling the whole vector forward because the editing is structural. It's like, oh, I know I'm inside this list. I'm going to pull it here. And now if I do it one more time, boop. Oh, I brought it actually below that into. But now I'm within the form again. So the 3 is what's moving, can come back up and go around it. And the slurping and the barfing work on whole forms as well. So it's like, it happened to be the case that these numbers were the next thing in front of my cursor and they were single characters, but it can work on a whole thing. So let me start a new list. I'm going to say like, I don't know, I want this to be called like thing or whatever. So I've made this new form and I want to grab that. So I just came to the end here and I slurped and it pulled it inside. So now I'm inside this let binding and it stuck this vector inside this close square and this close normal paren as well. And so I don't know, I'm like I said, this is not a super well prepared presentation, but I've been really interested in this notion of structural editing because it was kind of unfamiliar to me. And there were sort of like inklings of it in other modes. Like, there are plenty of like HTML editing modes where it's like, oh, jump to the close tag or the opening tag or whatever. So it's like introducing some of these ideas of like, it's not just text, it's code, and there's some structure to the code, and there's some ideas here. But I hadn't personally experienced this like mental model of going entirely into this structural editing mode, and thinking about it completely in terms of code and the tree structure, as opposed to like, yeah, I'm editing sentences or whatever. So anyway, that's yeah, I was hoping to have kind of a discussion about people's experiences with like different ways of thinking about text editing and code editing and whatnot. I'm not really interested in like tips and tricks discussions. Like I'm not, I don't really want to hear about like, oh, I've got this kick-ass Vim plugin because it lets me jump around or whatever. But like, if there is a Vim plugin that introduces like a new way of thinking about how you're getting around and making changes and stuff, I think that's interesting stuff. That's my intro. Roundtable, go.
So I found this no. So my last job was at a closure shop, and when I joined, I was brand new to closure. I had never written any closure. And structural editing at first, I was like, this is no, and no one was like, you had to use a certain editor or anything. I had some coworkers who used Emacs. I had some coworkers who used IntelliJ, with a like a ParEdit structural editing plugin. And I was like, no, I'm going to use VS Code. I can't handle learning this on top of closure as well. I did that for a while, until like the burden of parentheses got to be too much, because the amount of parentheses, right? There's just a huge number of them. And finally, one day I sat down and just worked on like basic slurp, barf, like, and raise, which is like popping something out of its like the outer forms. And I just sat and like I drilled it like I do like piano or whatever, because I've played piano for forever, where I just like put in a bunch of forms and then just practice like moving them out and moving them in and moving them that way, moving them that way. And now that I'm familiar with it, I miss it every single day I code. I am writing Elixir at this point. But when I miss it most, and I put this in the chat as well, but like in JSX, HTML, anything HTML like, I don't know, PHP or ERB or embedded Elixir, anything where it's the opening tags, closing tags, because those are so Lisp-like. I am constantly wishing I could just use structural editing in there, so I could be like, oh, I need this tag up and out. Okay, well, first copy. Oh, no, I have to remove this. Oh, now I have to move this tag in and out. And I'm like, if I could just raise or splice or pop this out and move it out, and then it would handle all of the opening and closing and the internal structure, because all I care about for it is using units as data, like the whole point of structural editing, versus, well, I don't want to worry about managing my opening and closing tags myself. Like, please never make me do that, right? We all know what happens then, especially with tags, because, oh, I moved it and oh no, did I rename it? Now it's the wrong one, things like that. But like, it was so surprising to me, because I remember doing structural editing at first and just being like, what is happening? What do you mean this is hope? Like, and it was so foreign. And then I understood it and I'm like, this is incredible. And I genuinely miss it like, it was such a new paradigm and so genuinely mind-blowing and helpful to thinking about code that I literally miss it every single day. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the HTML and like templating languages connection is so right on, because like, you know, like I use WebStorm for my daily driver at work, because it's a full like front end gig. So like makes sense. It's real smart about like JSX and TypeScript and all that good stuff. But it's got all these like really, really specific commands about like just thinking about tags and attributes and just like you can kind of get there where it's like, oh, I don't really want to think about closing tags or like renaming things or whatever. But like it's all so specific and such a like big grammar of stuff if you
Yeah.
choose to explore that stuff. And so like I mostly ignore all that stuff in WebStorm. I mostly just use Vim commands to get around.
Yeah.
With like a couple of exceptions. But like the thing that's so elegant about the structural editing thing is just like it's a pretty small conceptual model. And because you're working in this language that has such a limited amount of syntax, it just applies to everything really easily. And I agree. I totally missed that in HTML because it's like you're hopping around and like it feels like you should be able to
Right.
do this.
And I get why, like, the syntax is so different. Like, I completely understand, but at the end of the day, I'm like, here's my open, here's my close. There's stuff inside, and at least with in HTML itself, it's not the case, but with everything else, it's all just functions and it's just arguments inside it. We're just writing it with pointy things instead. The closest thing I've found in VS Code, and it's not comparable, but if you fold the form you're working on, like with the little caret in the side, which is why you could do it with the shortcut too. This is why it's not even remotely comparable. You can copy and paste it while folded, and then it's like you're moving a form. We do what we can.
I do that, Max. I do that. I collapse things and then, but you can't slurp and barf them.
No.
Like with just like commands. You can collapse, you can copy and paste entities in that way,
Right.
but you can't inject or like
And then you rearrange them and it's a mess. And every time I do it, I'm like, Clojure wouldn't do this to me.
Yeah, and it moved it'll at least my VS Code will kind of like bump like closing tags, the indentation level of them, and it'll just mess things up in a way. Casey, or the Vim users with the slurping and the barfing, or like, can you inject delimiters into a thing? Like you had that array.
Yeah.
Can you inject commas into something that you've kind of like slurped together?
Well, you don't need commas in Clojure, is one of the interesting things about it. But yeah, there are more of these commands. Some of them I don't really know yet, but like, you can sorry, I think I'm not answering your question. Please please restate your question. I feel like I went off on a tangent
I don't know what my
immediately.
question is. I'm so used to like working, like if you think about something that like, I don't know my question. It's essentially I'm thinking about doing that with Ruby, and I would need a comma in between each element, and like being able to like add or subtract things to an array without adding and subtracting things that are necessary to add, subtract things. Like I need a comma. Like I need something to add that additional character. If you're going to put something inside an array with me, I need you to bring along a comma.
Yeah. And I think that's, what you're getting at there is why we can't just, without a lot of extra thought, backport this structural editing idea to languages with richer syntax. Like, the whole deal with Lisp is there's almost no syntax. There's hardly any syntax. Right. Everything is just a list. And like, white space, like commas are white space. So like you can put commas in there, but you don't need them. They're not like meaningful. And just building these lists, moving things around between lists, breaking lists apart, creating new lists, like that's all you're doing, as opposed to like, I'm adding something to an array, I'm adding something to a hash map, I'm adding something to a set. Like those aren't meaningfully distinct operations when there's not very much syntax for them. But one thing I was thinking of that kind of gets at that is like, we're seeing the resurgence isn't the right word because they're not resurging, but we're seeing the surgence of these I don't know. We're seeing the rise of these new tools like Tree Sitter and like Prettier and things like that work on the abstract syntax trees of your code. Like they're parsing the code. Like this is really popular in JavaScript land. I don't know how it is in Ruby, but like these tools right now are really popular that are essentially formatters, but the way that the formatter works isn't like using regexes or whatever. It's like it's parsing the code smartly using an actual parser of the language and then taking that AST and using it to build a consistent formatting output for things. And I think you would need that kind of functionality, but going in reverse in order to have that kind of structural editing be consistently applicable in a language with a lot of syntax like Ruby or Python or whatever. And I don't even know if that's possible. I think that might be a one-way function. I'm not sure.
Yosef?
Yeah, I have a few thoughts about this. I don't know which order to do them in. I can just start with that. Like what I mentioned in Slack or maybe on the doc is like, this is a really interesting topic and not just in the editing part, because a lot of it, especially with what we do, is like diffing as well. And when you get things like watching changes, it's just a different way of like understanding changes. And so much of it, especially Git, is like built for line-based changes, which makes it really good for code. There's some fuzzy edges there, but bad for some other stuff like prose that you may want to like rewrap and everything. And so there's some ideas about like word diffs, which is sort of like the structural difference of like with prose. But then even some code stuff gets difficult with like you're like re-indenting or something or doing some formatting. And so I remember when I was at GitHub, I don't know where it is now, but there's definitely an idea of like more semantic diffs and understanding the structure of what goes on. Because a lot of times what you really care about is like how the AST is changing. Like what is the real change that's happening here? And yeah, there is what you were saying, like Lisp takes out a whole step because you are basically writing the AST or literally writing the AST. So there's no trying to figure out like, okay, the AST changed. What does that mean in the syntax? And it's not just a richer syntax deal, but it could be that because of the richer syntax, there could be ambiguous changes, right? Like if I want to represent this AST change, what is like the actual code syntax change that means it? Could be multiple things that do it. And that could be still fine if you have, some rules, some formatting things. It's like we'll have a standard, right? Or a configurable standard. But yeah, there's like, it's hard because that isn't necessarily a bidirectional symmetric deal.
Yeah, I think that symmetry is really the big thing there is like to go in that opposite direction with that kind of thing for like a Ruby or something like that. You would just have to give up control over specifically which syntax comes out on the other side of that transformation. You'd have to just say, okay, I guess arrays always look like this or whatever.
Yeah. But I mean, I've thought about it as well, because like working on this Elixir project with Max, and that there is like a certain level of the AST and syntax, and there's a lot of formatting things that I don't necessarily agree with, but it's the formatting. And sometimes it gets really annoying. It's like you add one extra element to an array or a list, and then it's like, okay, now it has to be split to multiple lines. I'm like, I don't care about this diff. Like this is not meaningful to me, right? but it's something that you have to look at and you have to understand. Or there's things like you're saying, if you change the wrapping or pull something out and wrap it around, then it's this whole deal that maybe you can fix in some way by ignoring white space, but that has its own trouble and it doesn't always fix it. And yeah, I mean, it's all fascinating and interesting. And to me, a lot of it comes down to less the how the editing works, but how you understand the changes over time, because I care, I think always about the collaboration and then also tracing things like the git blame spelunking that I end up doing. And I'm like, I don't care about all these stop points. This is not helpful at all, right? You're just
Yeah.
annoying me as I go through.
Yeah, HTML is another big one there. It's like one person wrote 99% of this component, and then a year later, one person wrapped that component inside another component. But now
And-
the second person is on the blame for that whole thing.
Yeah.
Right,
And I
because
mean,
it indented.
yeah, technically correct, but also what do I
Yeah.
care? I also want to talk about the Vim deal, because it is interesting, and I pasted some stuff in the Slack channel, because it's like the modal stuff, and then also I tend to think a lot more in terms of motions than text objects. Sometimes I use the text objects, but there are motions as well, which is more like, to the next instance of this character or to the end of line or whatever. But it's a similar deal. It's like you're basically saying like, what's the verb and then what's the thing that you're operating on. So it's like delete motion. Like the thing could be motion, or it could be a text object, or there's probably even more to it. And it's also it's interesting as well. The mention of folding, because that's generally what I do in situations like you showed, like trying to get rid of a function or whatever, because the example that you had, if you could pull it up again, that Ruby example. And if I understand this correctly, which, what's the choice? Like def show, that's a paragraph, but def print is multiple paragraphs. Correct?
Right. Yeah, because there's a couple of blank lines inside the definition.
If
So
you
if
were
I
on like that chosen badges line and you did DAP, what would happen? Yeah.
right, yeah, it doesn't mean the same. It doesn't always mean the same thing as delete
Right.
method.
So
I-
a lot of it has to do with like understanding like the syntax and things and having the right plugins. I'm not saying, the cool trick is like making sure that it knows the syntax. And often what I do is I will fold and then delete, right? Because then it is like, as far as it's concerned, it's one line, because there's like the logical lines and then the visual lines on the screen, which is another like maybe sub mode or something to think about. Again, dropping my GitHub creds is in the Atom days, I worked on the Vim mode plugin for that because I'm a Vim person and I can't really, I'm too old to understand really how to do anything with another editor. So I'm like, I need these motions, I need these verbs, I need this something, and I need like, and the understanding of the visual lines versus the actual logical lines was an interesting thing. Like you have to understand it more when you're working on the interpretation of it or the execution of it. I probably have more stuff to say, but Max has had his hand up. So
Yeah, I have a really basic question about DAP. It works the same with like curly braces and stuff, right? Like how does it know what like a paragraph is? Is it based on delimiters in a given language and it just knows that automatically?
no,
I
because
think it's blank lines.
yeah,
Oh,
that's
it's blank lines. Okay.
there are other things that you can do where it's like, I don't know it off the top of my head, because like DAW is delete a word. Right.
So like
do me a favor on random badges, type DAW right now. Right now,
okay.
I'll do it. And now DIW. You see how that's
What's
subtly different?
no.
I is inner. A is so do it again. And
Here's
now DAW.
A with the round, delete a
Okay.
round word. Boink.
Yeah, so it gets
Oh,
rid
it
of
got
this
rid of the space.
afterward as well.
Okay.
So these are things that like you learn. There's also with
Sure,
the
sure.
motion, there's like T character, which means up to that, and then F because it's a T with a thing. I don't know. It also includes that character.
Yeah, if I DTB, that deleted to the first B that I found, or if I DFB, it deleted through that B.
And
Okay.
then you stick like numbers in there or something, and you understand it, but there's this whole syntax. As Casey said, it's a really good way of thinking about it. Like you are sort of teaching, you're like expressing this whole thing of what you want to do.
Okay. So it's
Right.
not language based though. It is word character or like
Yeah, but
line
like,
based.
but Vim is very extensible, so you can add your
Right.
emotions and do all this stuff.
Okay, but
Plugins, yeah. And
so
the other,
paragraph is like visual paragraph though. It's not like a code block. So it
nope.
doesn't care about def, do, end versus curlies, for example. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's not language aware. And here's an example. This is from my Emacs config. I use evil mode, which is the Vim emulator inside Emacs. So, you know, there's a little bit of like crossing the streams gnarliness here, but
Mhm.
this is a perfect example of that. Word, what is a word? It means different things in different languages. So, you know, for example, in CSS, a dash, an interior dash between two English words, that's still conceptually one word, right? Like, you know, a line dash text. Conceptually, that's one thing, right? That's like
Right,
one
that's one like
unit of code.
CSS word, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But not true in C. That would be a line minus text. That's three conceptual things in C.
Yes, okay, got it.
So I've got this gnarly little thing here that per language that I care about is defining what is a word, because I do a lot of word motion. You know, I'm jumping forward and backwards by word. When I'm in HTML, you know, I want them to be underscores. When I'm in, you know, I have
That makes
to
sense.
come in and like define this stuff. This is not something that Vim already knows about. I have to tell it like, hey, depending on what I'm doing, slightly modify your notion of word or whatever.
Yeah, which can be like, it can be weird to think about, or it can be disorienting, but it can also be just like you don't have to change your mode of thinking at all because when you're in one language or the other, you still say the same thing, like delete a word or move a word forward. And
Right,
because of
right.
the language you're in, it's like, oh, I know what you mean by a word. I'm not going to be shitty about this.
I know when I've used like IntelliJ, they just have that done by like massive amounts of settings where like you go into your language thing and they've got the defaults where like, oh, this is a word, like, you know, dashes for using that example is not a word boundary in CSS, whereas in another language, you can't have the, like in C or something or JavaScript, you can't just have a dash hanging out because that's definitely a word boundary. So that's cool.
Yeah, and this, like what you're saying, like this to me is just sort of like a Turing complete language, right? Like as long as you can end up doing the same behavior, I don't really care how you have to set it up. I care how I have to set it up, you know?
Mhm.
But like as long as you get the same behavior where you're not having to offload even more, like, oh, I'm in CSS. And then things can get really interesting depending on the syntax information you have and the editor, where it's like, oh, you're doing some Ruby, but you have like a here doc SQL inside. And so it knows that it's SQL in that area, even though the whole thing is Ruby, or similar to like what we're doing in Elixir with all the components. Like it is Elixir, but as soon as you get into like the tilde H,
Right. Once you're into the template.
like it's HTML or Heeks or whatever. And there are these mixed rules or mixed rules for the whole file at least. And it gets really interesting. And it's all about, you know, the syntax. I know you have your hand up, Chris. Just one more thing that I want to say is a lot of what helps learning stuff with Vim or me is like sort of what you were saying with like forcing yourself to practice, like the piano deal. And sometimes people will do this. They'll like disable the arrows, so you have to use the HJKL or all these various things. And to me, what helps me think about like doing something quote unquote correctly is when I repeat it, is it going to do what I would expect? Because you can press dot to repeat the last thing. And as an example, like I used to, when changing things, I would like delete to somewhere and then, press I for insert mode and start typing. And then I want to do it again and I press dot and all it does is the typing that I did, because those are two separate deals. So I learned C instead of D because that's change, and then it does the whole deal. And there's one plugin called Repeat by Tim Pope, the plugin writer,
I have heard much
90
about Tim
the
Pope.
90% plugin writer for Vim or something. And it helps, like, as long as some other plugins are written correctly, then it makes the repeat do what you expect, right? With surround, I think with surround, when you're like changing the surround deal, if you don't have repeat.vim installed and you press dot, like weird shit happens. But if you do have it, then it's just like, oh yeah, here's another string that you're returning, that you're changing double quotes to single quotes or whatever. I do have one more thing, but Chris, I've talked enough.
Oh, I remember what I was going to say.
Sorry, man.
No. It was just that like all of those different kind of mode tweakages that you're doing, they still kind of bottom out as like a regex usually. That usually you're defining something in terms of like kind of like this is what the end of a sentence looks like, or this is what the end of a paragraph looks like. And usually Emacs at least will have some kind of variable that you can like set to something else if you want.
Yeah, you're totally right though. It's all regexes under the hood. It's like
So
we're just searching.
I love
the
regexes.
text.
you're just dynamically like defining a regex.
Yeah,
exactly.
or you're just and then like when you switch to a different mode, that regex will get like swapped out behind the scenes or something like that. Some of these newer modes, I think they actually promise to like tie into the parser for the language, or have their own parser for the language. And so you'd be able to really say something like, no, I just want to delete this variable. And even if a variable looks the same as like a string or not some other identifier, it can still tell the difference because it actually is hooked into the parser.
Yeah, that's some of the buzz around the tree sitter stuff in Emacs is like if you load up a big Ruby file in Emacs, it's gonna really chug because it is all regex based syntax highlighting. And it's single threaded, it's an old program, it'll block the render thread while it figures all that stuff out. And so it's like, yeah, you change a thing and it chugs for a while to figure it out. Much worse than some more modern things that can, kick that rendering out to another thread. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of optimization work that's gone into the regexes, so it's not usually too bad, especially if you're writing good Ruby code and keeping your files small-ish. But if you jump into some legacy code base and there's a 1,000-line file, it's like really starts to get nasty. But with the tree sitter stuff, it's people are working on things that are not so ad hoc and a little bit more based on like what is the actual grammar of this language.
Yeah. I remembered what I wanted to say, and Chris, something that you said brought it back to mind. I can't actually even remember what it is, though. But just thinking about what Cody was asking earlier, like thinking about some, this happening with Ruby, right? Like adding the things to the list and putting the commas or whatever is another thing that this is not necessarily editor specific, but it's another sort of mode or mental deal, is like using all the tools at your disposal. And because one of the things I'll do is like, yeah, I'll use all these different, ways of like folding or motions or whatever, or maybe I'll be able to like slurp some stuff into this list, but then I'll be like, well, I also know regexes, right? So I can do like on this line, just everywhere there's like replace space with comma space, right? Like the it all comes down to regexes. So like there's a lot of stuff you can do, or I can even do like if it's just numbers, it's like or maybe it's not just numbers or whatever. I'll do like anything on that line within here that's not a space. I will replace it with the thing in double quotes followed by a comma, right? So you can just do all these things, but sometimes it's nice if you don't have to do it in multiple little steps. Again, with my thinking for Vim is like, if I need to do it again on another line, it would be nice to be like dot, right? And it'll do the whole thing as opposed to just the last step I did. Yeah, the tools are all there. Sometimes you have to write a bit yourself or cobble some things. But yeah, the tree sitter stuff is really interesting. And stuff like this is very compelling for, why is it so great to use Clojure or a Lisp? Maybe there are many reasons, but one of the reasons is like, because it's not a rich syntax, then that means there's the things that you can do with it to manipulate it can be so much bigger. Yeah.
They've just had all these things for like ages. Like Emacs has had slime for like a long time. I think that was it.
The superior Lisp interaction mode for Emacs.
Yeah.
I do love the evil being the thing. Isn't there like an Emacs mode for VI as well that has a
like that? Oh no, why would you do that?
Yeah, that's what I use a lot, evil.
No, but that's the other. That's Emacs having VI stuff. But I don't know if there's maybe there isn't, which shows which one is superior, right? It's VI because you don't need a mode to go to the other one.
So
yeah, I mean that's that concept of having like the editor talk over some channel to like the parser or the like REPL for the language. That's kind of like an old school Emacs idea, and now kind of like the LSP that VS Code has built in now is kind of like taking that to many more languages.
I was going to ask how many of you. Oh no, you're okay. How many of you have, I don't know, switched your editor? Like after really kind of like developing like a lot of love and like familiarity with an editor, how many of you have like embarked upon a new one? Yeah. What made you do it? Did you find that you ever found the love that you had for an old one? How long did it take you to reach productivity? Or like a point where you like really felt like you were working well?
Well, I started out with Emacs and I switched to Vim because my hands started to hurt. And actually I learned Vim pretty quick. I was able to, I don't remember exactly when I learned Vim, but I was able to dedicate like a few days to like really just read through the tutorial and get some practice time in and stuff, and like just like take my time with it and get it under my fingers pretty quick. So it was a fairly quick transition for me to do that. But then I missed some of the more powerful stuff that you can do with eLisp in Emacs, and so I went back to Emacs. But around that time, Evil, the Vim emulation mode, kind of reached the point where it was good enough to basically act like I'm using Vim most of the time, but still have access to the Emacs stuff. I wouldn't recommend wasting all the time that I have wasted cumulatively in my life playing around with editors.
Yeah. I feel like I can't remember everything. I feel like I did some VI, or I started with some normal whatever editors. And I think a lot of like getting into VI had to do with doing things remotely on terminals, right? Where sometimes you actually just have VI and not even Vim. I think nowadays you always have Vim and not VI, but and it's just nice to not have to think about differences. But that said, I mean, I definitely did use some other things. Even my last job at Stripe, I finally had to break down and use VS Code for some stuff. No, not VS Code, IntelliJ, because I was working on Scala. And there's maybe Vim stuff that helps with Scala, but like I was going nuts trying to figure out like why the types weren't working or what. And so IntelliJ at least understood it and would at the end of every line would be like, okay, so yeah, this is a tuple or whatever that looks like this. Now it's this because you did this thing and this and this and this. And like I just needed that. Otherwise I could not be productive at all. But like at some point in there, I got like somebody's .vm and used that. And I read like Vim script the hard way, which is, and like got to understand it so much better and did my own customization. Some of it is just what plugins I use and then all these other things as well.
The really nice thing about the JetBrains stuff is that it can read your vimrc. Like it's got a Vim mode that is smart enough to just like, I mean, it's not exactly the same as legit Vim, but it's really close, and it understands also, vimrc.
There's also the whole Vim versus Neo Vim, and like Neo Vim, you can do stuff in Lua or something. I don't know. Whereas as opposed to just Vim script, which is its own something. So yeah, and I resist Neo Vim. I also don't use just Vim. I use Mac Vim because I like to be able to command tab to an editor as opposed to just which one of my terminals is running this.
Oh, for a while, my whole workflow was all in one terminal window, no tabs, and I would Control Z to background Vim, run terminal commands, and then FG to bring it back up.
And now in Emacs, you have like, because you have like the running deal in another pane, right, or whatever.
Yeah, the Emacs server.
Yeah, I know people who do that, and I'm just like, nah. Mac Vim is where I do the editing, and then I tab over to terminal to like run tests or whatever. But to each their whatever works.
Yeah. A lot of ways to skin that cat.
Don't be skinning cats. Although my cat is kind of an asshole, maybe you can skin him.
A lot of ways to pet that cat.
A lot of ways to pet that cat.
It's skin in the video game sense, you know, like put a texture all over the cat.
I like it. I like it.
Like,
that's good.
And make him look like Doom Guy or something.
Or the Minecraft dude. Good times. Well, now that we're getting close to the riff zone, maybe it's time
I've got we're gonna stay tangential here.
A little alert has popped up on my screen.
Ooh, that's what we need. I'll talk to Jim and Amanda and see if we can get some graphics on here. It's like riff zone warning. We'll wrap it up, guys.
Like a missile lock-on warning in a fighter jet.
Yeah.
There's a gravity to it that like it like sucks you in. Like you have to like change course now, otherwise.
You've passed the riff event horizon.
Exactly, it's the riff black hole. Maybe it's a riff wormhole. We'll just see where we pop out on the other side. I think that's how we usually use it. And then there's that one time it got us into the Swiss arrows. So that was something. Maybe I'm the one who remembers the Swiss arrows.
Oh no, I remember.
Yeah.
That really
thank you. Thank you for the interesting discussion, everyone.
Yeah. No, thank you for the kickoff. Yeah. I guess we'll wrap it up there. See you guys next time. 2 weeks. Like and subscribe.
Cool.
Check it out, the doobly-doo or whatever. Later.
Take care, everybody.